Hello again. Welcome to our final Aspire session of 2021. Today, we will be talking about navigating fear and anxiety, something that I think all of us are experiencing due to living in a global pandemic, plus life is just challenging. So, it's something that will persist throughout life, times of fear and anxiety, depression. So with me here today is Emily Prusator, and Emily works as a psychotherapist for the Gil Institute for Trauma Recovery and Education, and as a clinical training associate for the Wendt Center for Loss and Healing in Washington, D.C. She might be familiar to some of y'all because she joined us for Aspire last year, and she's also a program facilitator for Venture to Impact and was with us in Romania back in 2019. And Emily is passionate about walking alongside people who are on the pathway towards healing amidst grief, trauma, and the intersection of both. So Emily, welcome. Thanks so much for being here with us.
Thank you for having me. I was just thinking about how my hair was a lot longer when we were here last time. It's funny, Brianna and I were talking about the passage of time these days and how we need some of those reminders that time is passing because it can feel like it's a big blob lately. So I'm going to hold on to that as, oh yeah, that was a year ago. My hair was a lot longer.
Mine too.
Yeah.
Okay, so we just did an exercise together that I think we should do right now as well because I found it really helpful. So
amazing.
Will you do that for us?
I will. I'm going to lead everybody through it. So even though I can't see any of you, I'm going to be trusting that behind those cameras, you're doing this, even if you look very strange to your office mates or housemates or whoever is in your space. So we are going to do something to help our bodies kind of release a little bit of the tension that we hold when we're, number one, surviving and living in a global pandemic and many other crises, honestly, as Brianna named. But number two, when we feel trapped in these little Brady Bunch boxes that we all live in these days in the Zoom world. So take a minute with me to allow your body to be in the physical world. And you're going to hold your arms up like this. This is called cactus arms for this reason, right? We look kind of like a cactus sitting here. And only go as far as it feels comfortable. This is not about stretching or working out or pushing yourself. This is just about a release and what feels comfortable. So we're going to do 3 of these, and when we breathe in through our nose is most helpful, I find. We're going to bring our arms up as high as you can get them comfortably. All right, and then when you breathe out, you're going to bring your arms down and really try to drop those shoulders backwards if you can. All right, so here we go. Take a breath in and out. Out through that mouth can really release some of that extra air. Breathe in and out. Last one, breathe in and out. I love this one because it's doing the physical opposite of what our body tends to do when we're sitting at a computer screen, which is hunch over like this, right? So we're giving our body a chance to expand rather than contract. And we're also doing some movement with our breath. When someone just tells me to take a deep breath, that doesn't feel very helpful for me. But if I can pair it with movement, that might sometimes shift things a little bit differently when I'm able to do that. So after just trying that with me, because I'm going to trust that you did it, notice what's shifted in your body. Just take a minute to do a little scan from head to toe. Maybe you feel a little bit of releasing in your chest. That's what I usually notice. Maybe you feel it in your head. There's a little bit of room for your brain to get up in there. Maybe you just feel a little bit more aware, a little bit more focused, a little bit more present. Just notice what shifted. Maybe nothing. That's okay too.
Thanks, Em. I really like the addition of the arms because usually I just take some deep breaths, but I like opening up and involving more of my body. So I'm going to put that into practice more regularly.
Love it.
Okay, so we're here today to talk about fear and anxiety. So I know that in your work, you primarily work with people who are navigating grief and trauma, and I'm sure that anxiety is a part of that. But I'd like to start with hearing about your own experience with anxiety. Would you share with us a few experiences in your life when you were experiencing anxiety?
Absolutely. Yeah, let's get personal right off the bat, right?
Yeah. Lead with
I don't,
vulnerability.
yeah, lead with vulnerability. And that's what's real, right? All of us experience anxiety at some point in our lives. And for me, it's been a theme for sure in my life, that the thread of anxiety has been very real. So I can think back probably as young as 8 or 9. I remember struggling with some significant anxiety. So things like waking up in the middle of the night and being terrified that my house was going to burn down, right? I don't even know what triggered that, where I got that from. Maybe it was from a book or a movie, or I didn't even have anyone in my life that had experienced a house fire. Hadn't had a close call with fire, but I was just terrified of that. And our brains can tend to lock on to something like that, especially if there's images that go with it. So I can remember waking up in the middle of the night and being terrified, right? Many of us may have memories like that, where you can remember needing our parents or other caregivers or adults to come in and help us regulate, because we're just learning how to regulate our systems in that place. But that's kind of the first moment that I can think back to. And as a kid, I learned some skills. I learned some skills for managing that. I was able to get some support for that. And for a while it was a lot better, or at least it was managed, right? All of us, I think, in the modern world live with this kind of low grade anxiety, which I'll explain a little bit more in a minute why that is, and why that might be. But I remember another critical period when that anxiety really reached a peak again, and that would be during grad school. So, I tended to be someone who didn't really struggle with school most of my life, but I hit grad school and it became really overwhelming. In my program in grad school, which is social work, to be trained to be a therapist, not only was I going to classes, writing papers, doing tests, right, all the normal things of grad school, I was also doing an internship. And, I was doing an internship in the world of grief and trauma, which is what I had always wanted to do. And I was excited to get to learn. And I felt really unsteady. There were days where I felt like I had no idea what I was doing. And that can be very anxiety provoking. Those of us who struggle with anxiety, we learn how to control the world around us to kind of avoid some of those triggers, right? We get really good at avoiding the things that make us feel anxious. We get really good at doing only the things we know we can control and only the things we know we're good at. And I was stepping into something very new. Right. And I was being also encountered by lots of inputs that were anxiety provoking, stories of people who had significant traumatic events in their life. So even someone else's story can also impact our own experience of anxiety. And that was very real for me in grad school. And I would say that was the first time where I, as an adult, was starting to experience panic attacks, like at that level where, I even at one point went to the hospital because I literally thought I was having a heart attack, right? That's a very real thing that people who struggle with anxiety at any point in their lives might feel. And it can be really hard to talk about. There can be a lot of shame about that. There can be a lot of embarrassment about that. You can feel like you're the only person that's struggling with these specific type symptoms of anxiety that I'll get into a little bit more later. But it's real, right? It's a physical, bodily experience that can feel incredibly overwhelming. And I, once again, got amazing support, both in my own therapy, in my community, in just my own personal practices of grounding, in my own boundary setting around what I take in, and when I kind of put a little bit of a line between me and other people's stories to be able to take care of myself, right? Not because I'm selfish or because I don't want to hear people's stories, but those boundaries are important with anxiety too. I would say there's been a kind of low simmer of anxiety over the last year and a half, which all of us probably can relate to in terms of the pandemic. Anxiety right now makes a whole lot of sense, and I'll get into that, the why of that as well. But for me, lately, anxiety has shown up in slightly different ways. It's not quite the same bodily response that I had when it reached its peak in grad school. I've learned ways to kind of take care of that, notice the warning signs, catch that before it gets so intense that it's unmanageable. Although there's times where I've noticed it creeping up, right? I'm noticing the tight chest, I'm noticing some of the physical responses. But lately, anxiety has actually been showing up as anger. And that's an interesting piece too, right? Anger is one of those secondary emotions. It's usually on top of another emotion, whether that's sadness or fear or hurt or disappointment or hunger, right? Not really an emotion, but anger usually is the mask we put on top of other emotions. And so for me,
can I just pause and have you repeat that? Because
Yep.
That was such a big learning for myself.
Yep.
So I just want to have you
Absolutely.
reiterate that for everybody, that anger is usually on top of another emotion.
Yeah. And let me use a metaphor that I use with my kids all the time, my clients. Anger is like an iceberg, right? So the part that's above the surface that we show to the world is it often looks like anger. And anger is that tip of the iceberg, right? But underneath there's this huge block of ice that can be all kinds of other feelings, right? So when that sadness gets triggered, we might lash out with anger. When that hurt gets triggered, we might lash out with anger. Anger is an emotion that pushes other people away. And so we don't have to allow them to see our more vulnerable emotions like sadness or fear or hurt, right? And so sometimes that anxiety is really vulnerable to show to the world. And so the anger is a mask that we put on top of it. Yeah. Let that digest, let that percolate. Yep. And the other thing about anger, it can also often be a way that we're trying to control the world around us. Right. And so for me, that's really how it has shown up. When I feel that anxiety rising, I find myself getting a little more controlling of the people around me, controlling of little things, right? Like how to load the dishwasher. And some of you may relate to that, right? So when that anger is rising, when that need for control is rising, I have to slow down and be like, where's the fear here? Where's some of the anxiety here? Because that's usually what's going on under the surface for me. So if you're there as well, come with us on the next, the next 30 minutes or so. We're gonna dive into this and what this looks like.
Yeah. The control piece also, I'm just thinking about, when there's just so much change going on right now, pandemic flux, that's a huge part of the anxiety that we're experiencing. And so when that happens, we just want that little sense of control, something that we can't feel like we can control our emotions, the external world. And so we just want something. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's, right there with you. So in your, from hearing your personal stories, I hear that anxiety often involves, there's some fear, and it's something that you mentioned a few times, like it's in your body, and it's not necessarily something that's rational, and it doesn't have to be, because it's something you're experiencing yourself. It can also come from interactions with other people. So, but would you help us define what is anxiety? We talk about this a lot. We say we're anxious or I'm experiencing anxiety, but help us understand what is it really?
Yeah. I think one of the most helpful ways for understanding what's going on when we're having anxiety and kind of understanding what it is to go to some of the brain science. So this is where, if any of you tuned into my last talk with Z2I, I'm a little bit of a nerd about the brain science, but anxiety is a product of how our brains evolved in an attempt to keep us safe, right? So anxiety is often kind of a version of what are called our fight or flight primal threat responses. Freeze is also one of those, right? So our bodies have this amazing capacity when we're under threat, when our lives are in danger, to get the heck out of there or fight to save our lives, right? Or freeze long enough to be able to then respond, right? So if any of you have ever been in a close call in the car, think about when you're driving a car and you have to suddenly slam on the brakes. Okay, so imagine that moment when you slam on the brakes. Think about what happens in your body in that moment. Your heart starts pounding. You probably feel flush in your face. There's a rush of heat that often happens. Oftentimes, you might even feel some like muscle tension to the point where you might even be sore the next day from having to kind of catch yourself. If you're not familiar with driving a car, you haven't had that. Think about when you have to catch yourself from falling. Right? Our body goes into that quick response mode to be able to catch us from falling. Same thing. Our heart starts to pound. We might sweat a little bit. We might have some flushing. Our muscles tense up, right? That is amazing. Our body should do that when we need to slam on the brakes, when we need to catch ourselves from falling, or, in early days of human existence, when we need to run away from a predator, right? We need to do something to keep ourselves alive. And that's great. Our brains have that amazing capacity, and that's important, right? So it's not about getting rid of those responses, But the thing is, in our modern world, there are a lot of incoming stimuli. There's a lot of inputs that are coming into our brain that our brain hasn't actually fully evolved to be able to process, right? So a lot of things get perceived as life-threatening moments that maybe aren't, right? A deadline can be interpreted in our brain as a life-threatening moment, right? Bad feedback from your boss can be interpreted by your brain as a threat. A harsh word from someone, a situation that you feel like you can't control, right? There's a lot of incoming stimuli, especially in our modern world where we have access to a constant news cycle, access to very traumatic things happening all over the planet. Our brain isn't always very good at deciphering what is a threat to me in this moment right now and what is a threat that's happening on the other side of the world. And our brain often isn't very good at deciphering, is this a threat to my physical safety or is my emotional safety under threat, right? Even if it's our emotional safety, our brain is going to go into that fight or flight mode. And so often anxiety responses are us being stuck in that loop of fight or flight. And we as humans are not very good at letting our body do its job when it has that response. We get in our heads, we judge ourselves. I said this in the last one, a lot of times what gets us into trouble is the feelings we have about our feelings, right? So when we're feeling fear, we then should on ourselves. We say, I shouldn't be feeling fear, right? Or I should know that this isn't that scary, right? So we don't actually listen to the wisdom of our bodies to allow some of that energy to move through us, and instead it gets stored up, right? And so all of that adrenaline and cortisol that's getting pumped into our system stays getting pumped into our system. And then it can be this awful self-fulfilling prophecy because that anxiety response does a couple things. Number one, it makes it really hard to sleep and rest, right? Adrenaline, cortisol gets you ready to be active. Great if you need to be active. Not so great at 11 p.m. at night when you're trying to sleep. But sleep is when our brain is able to clear away all that extra adrenaline and cortisol, right? So we're not able to do the thing that actually helps restore our functioning so that we're not in that state of anxiety all the time. So that's one thing. It makes it harder to sleep, and sleep is vital for being able to manage our anxiety. Number two, it makes us kind of get into this pattern of avoidance, right? So if something causes us anxiety, we tend to avoid it. That's our body's natural way of saying, nope, don't go near that thing, right? Just like if we, know that there's a certain outlet in our house that if you plug something in, it's going to shock you, right? That physical stimulus of oof, and your body has that anxiety response. We're probably not going to plug anything into that socket. Hopefully you go and call an electrician and get it figured out why it's shocking you. But right, our bodies have a natural way of figuring out that's not safe, this is safe. Avoid the things that aren't safe. But when our brain gets wired to see a lot of different things as a threat, we end up avoiding a lot of things like work tasks, right? Once the deadlines become an anxiety-provoking stimulus, we avoid doing the work because the work reminds us of the deadline. And then we get to the deadline and we haven't done the work, so we're even more anxious, right? So it's this self-feeding cycle where we avoid the things that remind us of the anxiety, but that actually just builds our anxiety more because we're avoiding the thing that will help us face that, what our brain is perceiving as a threat, right? So it's all of this working together, and we often get very stuck in that loop of anxiety because we're not giving ourselves the compassion and getting ourselves the help and support that we need, which I know we're going to get to in a minute. But I also want to talk about it. Sometimes it's helpful. So we can think about it as kind of the way our brains have evolved. We can think about it as kind of that cycle of avoidance, but we can also think about it as a spectrum. So our bodies and brains are meant to go into that fight or flight mode, but we also can go into like a shutdown mode, right? All of us kind of exist on that spectrum, whether we respond to threats and what's happening day to day on the higher end of the energy spectrum or on the lower end of the energy spectrum. It's often that spectrum from depression to anxiety. And some of us are on a pendulum and we feel like we're swinging back and forth between the two. And it's our body's way of trying to cope with what's going on around us. And we're not able to find an equilibrium somewhere in the middle, because we're struggling to find that sense of safety that can allow us to kind of ride the waves of emotion without getting kicked into those two places.
Yes. When Emily first told me about this spectrum from depression to anxiety, that was a game changer for me as well. But the self-feeding cycle, that one was, maybe I heard it differently this time, but yeah, we avoid the thing, and then in avoiding, it only makes it worse, and then just gets heightened. Okay, so great. Well, I'm feeling anxious a little bit, knowing more about anxiety.
And pause. Notice that. This is where it's important, right? Because we shove it down. We say, why am I feeling anxious? Pause, notice it, and just take a breath. It doesn't necessarily fix the anxiety. But when we can extend that exhale, it engages the part of our nervous system that says you're safe, right? And so when we can incorporate that a little bit more, it takes awareness. It takes us being able to notice when our anxiety is even happening. And if we can interrupt that cycle, even just for a second, over time, that helps in the long run. I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit to strategies, but
thank you for that. And I just, I feel like I need to ask myself, how can I be safe more regularly, or how am I safe? Just coming back to that reptilian brain, because I think that's something I'm taking away already from this conversation as well.
That's right. Yeah. Sometimes the question is, why am I feeling this way? As opposed to, I am feeling this way. How can I help myself feel more safe? Great point.
So true. Yeah. We always want to be like, why? But it's okay. It doesn't matter why. Or sometimes you just can't figure it out. Anyway, so how do the times that we're living in right now, how are they impacting anxiety?
Oof, my goodness. So I have some stats that I'll share in a minute, but anecdotally, I already talked about myself, but when I talk to colleagues and friends and clients, right, I am hearing about this just wave of anxiety that we're all living in right now. I have colleagues that have said to me, I didn't understand what anxiety actually felt like, right? I have some colleagues that tend more towards the depressive end of the spectrum, because we all fall somewhere on the spectrum. But this pandemic has brought them to the other end of that spectrum in a way they've never experienced, right? And it's intense when it hits you in the face. And those of us who maybe have struggled with anxiety for seasons of our life or all throughout our lives, it might be intensified even more, right? Just because you've navigated it before doesn't mean it's going to be easy this time, right? Every new season of anxiety has its own unique challenges. You might be entering with some more tools, right? You might have some tools. You might be able to hold on to the hope that you're not going to feel this way forever. That's an important one too. But at the end of the day, it's still hard, right? You'll notice that I keep coming back to this: don't judge yourself for it. Don't judge yourself for it, because that underpins everything about how we take care of ourselves. But there are some stats on this. It's actually pretty astounding. So in the pandemic, well, let me back up. Pre-pandemic, so from January to June 2019, so before we ever even heard of COVID, right? Before COVID was anywhere on the scene, the Kaiser Family Foundation did a survey among U.S. adults, so we're talking about adults in the U.S., around anxiety symptoms. And at the time, about 10% of the population of U.S. adults said that they had experienced anxiety symptoms of some kind. So 1 in 10 adults. That's pretty high already, right? That means like every 10 people you pass have experienced significant anxiety symptoms. In the pandemic, so since January of 2020, right? So a year later, after COVID had entered the scene, that same survey, same questions, 4 out of 10, 40% of US adults stated that they had been experiencing anxiety. So a 4 times increase is huge, right? And hopefully that means that there's some awareness and there's access to support. But also I'll tell you, there's been a huge wave of people seeking to access mental health support during this time, to the point where there's actually not enough therapists to provide the support that's needed. So we've got this kind of crisis coming to a head right now, where there's an increase in mental health symptoms, and there's also not enough therapists to meet the need, right? So that's something that keeps me up at night, to be honest. And it's scary to think about kind of the wave that's happening right now. But the other piece of it is, right, not everyone necessarily has to go to therapy to be able to take care of themselves in an anxiety response. And we'll talk about that a little bit. They'll take my therapist card away for saying not everyone needs therapy, but it's true, right? Not everyone needs professional support to be able to take care of themselves. And there is no shame in seeking professional support. I'm in therapy right now. I have been in therapy throughout my life, right? There's no shame in that. There is a lot of stigma in society, right? And there's a lot of barriers to overcome in terms of access. But it's important that there's lots of strategies. There's lots of ways to take care of yourself. One more thing I wanted to note, though, on these stats is that this is an even more increase. It's pushing 50% in particular communities. So that is communities of color. It's pushing 50% in terms of how many adults name that they have experienced anxiety, as well as frontline essential workers, folks who have had to continue working in person throughout the pandemic, right? So those are two particular populations that have even higher rates of anxiety right now. And it makes sense, right? There's a very real threat in our world. And it's incredibly confusing for our brain because our brain tells us fight, flee, right? But in the end, an invisible virus isn't something you can necessarily physically fight or run from, right? We had to stay home. We had to mask up, get vaccinated, right? Those are huge strategies, and our brain doesn't always process that as this is how I'm keeping myself safe. Sometimes our brain and those primal responses have to catch up to what a thinking part of our brain knows is keeping us healthy and safe.
Right. And it's just been such a long period of,
right.
of fear and anxiety and not being able to fight.
Yeah. So. And you talked about the pandemic flux, right? We're going back to in-person. We're not going back to in-person. Okay, now we're going to do this. No, we're not going to do that anymore, right? Not even knowing what the next month of your life is going to look like in terms of where you physically will work. That's also anxiety producing, right? So even outside of just the public health concerns and the health and safety concerns around that, just having uncertainty in the air and having things change suddenly and constantly, also anxiety producing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, definitely. Okay, so after that note, what can we do? What can we do to help ourselves when we're experiencing this?
Yeah, it's rough out there and there's hope, right? That's been my mantra, right? It's rough out there and there's hope. I already named one thing that's really, really important: breath. Our breath is the one thing while we're still living we have with us. And, breathing exercises don't always feel helpful to everyone right off the bat. There's a few tips and tricks that I usually tell people, because I know for me, when someone tells me just take a deep breath, that feels really annoying, right? It feels dismissive of my feelings. Like, you think that's going to fix this? No, right? I get that, right? And I have come around. I am now a believer in the breath, right? Because our breath is what actually allows our system to regulate. That's actually the main things our bodies need to regulate is oxygen and water, right? So that's another one. Drink water. Always have water next to you. I am one of those culprits who has the full glass of water. I forget to drink it and I guzzle it at the end of the day. That's not exactly what we're talking about. See if you can take sips throughout the day, keep that body hydrated. But the breath is really important, right? So that extending that exhale, expelling the extra stale air out of our system tells our parasympathetic nervous system to kick into gear, which keeps us feeling safe, right? It helps bring down that anxiety response. That breath can be challenging. So sometimes just focusing on your breath feels unhelpful. So some people really, benefit from like guided breathing exercises. They're all over YouTube. I have a specific one I can recommend that a colleague of mine recorded. It's really, really great. But having just something for your brain to pay attention to while you're breathing might feel helpful. Another thing is incorporating some movement, right? The cactus arms we did is great. You can also do it, I call it angel breath. So you cross your hands in front of your body, you raise it up like you're flying with your wings, and you raise them down. So almost like you're doing like snow angels in the snow as you're breathing. Movement can really help with that. What I love to do with kids is take 5 breathing. So you hold up your hand like this. You take your pointer finger like this. Yep, do it with me, Brianna. I hope all of you at home are doing it too. And we're just going to trace our hands while we're breathing. As we move up a finger or thumb, you're going to breathe in through your nose. As you move down a finger or thumb, you're going to breathe out through your mouth. Okay, let's try it all together. Here we go. And up. 3 more. And up. Last one. I like that one because there's a beginning and an end. You know it's not going to last forever. There's some certainty about the process. It's also tactile, right? It includes, that sensation of feeling skin on skin contact. It reminds you I'm a physical human being in a physical space right now. I love that one. Other people, even those feel overwhelming. So you kind of have to trick your brain into taking deep breaths. So the way I encourage people to do that is put on a song, right? If any of you are in choir, you know that your choir director used to tell you you had to take one breath in and then you had to sing until you saw a punctuation mark. I don't know if all of you had a strict choir director like I did, but you had to sing until you hit the punctuation mark, right? That's how singing is. So see if you can do that. Put on a song. It automatically regulates your breathing. You can't sing a song while hyperventilating, while having a panic attack, right? It's important to like catch yourself and be able to engage in that. And music is powerful in general, right? To be able to bring us into a different place, shift our mood, connect us to positive memories, right? Think about what is my breathing playlist going to help me, connect to that kind of energy that I want. It doesn't have to be soothing music even. It can be high energy music, but you're regulating your breath by singing along to it. So that's one category of important strategies. And these all fit into kind of the bucket of things we need to be doing every day throughout our day, right? There's no like quick fix it button for anxiety, right? It has to be
Are you sure?
practice. Oh, I wish. If you find one, call me up. I will pay you the big bucks to give it to me and I will give it to my clients and then my job will be done. I'm just kidding. There's not a quick fix, right? There's not like a button we can push to be like, anxiety gone. And we wouldn't want to, right? Because these primal threat responses are very helpful when they're needed, right? But it's about regulating them and choosing when we allow our bodies to go into that place. All right, so everyday strategies is the bucket. The categories I like to talk about. First, we hit number one, breathing. Okay, our breath is so important. Number two is grounding exercises. So this is anything that helps you feel connected to something solid, right? It can be as simple as stomping your feet on the ground. Sometimes when we're feeling anxious, it's tempting to kind of collapse in on ourselves and like pull our feet up and like curl up into a ball. It's important to counteract that a little bit. Put our feet on the ground. Notice what it feels like to be connected to the earth. Even if you're in an apartment building, you're not actually connected to the earth, right? Connect to the ground, the concrete beneath you, right? It can even be putting your hand on your lap and really feeling what it's like to have your hand making contact with your lap. Right? Anything that helps us feel like we're connected to the earth can be really, really helpful. One that's sort of connected to that is another type of strategy, which is sensory strategies. So anything that uses our five senses. One that I love to do is called Find Five Things. Here's how it goes. And you'll notice there's a lot of five strategies that I give people. There's Take Five that we just tried. This one's called Find Five Things. So all you're going to do is you're going to look up from the screen and I'm going to guide you through 5 different challenges. So the first one, look around your room, wherever you're sitting, find 5 things you can see. Brianna, you're my guinea pig. Name 5 things you can see.
My chalkboard, my fan, my clock, a picture frame, and my pen.
Love it. All right. Good job. That was 5. Now we're going to go to 4. See if you can name 4 things you can feel. So that's anywhere that your body or skin is making contact with something else. And it can be as subtle as like your glasses sitting on your ear. Okay.
I can feel the floor for my feet. I can feel my thighs on my chair. I'm not noticing my glasses too much, but I am noticing my headband around my head. And then I'm feeling my hands resting on my clothing on my lap.
Okay. Now we're down at 3. So number 3 is find 3 things you can hear.
Okay. I can hear my laptop, like it's probably a little warm, so I hear the fan going. I live on a fairly busy street, so I'm hearing just like some traffic noise. And I heard something, maybe like somebody dropped something.
Okay. Awesome. That one's a little trickier. And it's especially challenging if you force yourself to kind of go out then in. Try to find the most distant sounds and then come in closer. Okay. So that's 3. Number 2 is 2 things you can smell.
harder. I don't feel like
If you need to give your armpit a little smell, you can do that. If you smell your breath a little bit, you can do that.
Can I like intentionally smell something?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I have some lotion here on my desk. So
amazing.
I have a sensitive nose, so that was a little close. I shouldn't have.
What does it smell like?
Lavender.
Love it.
Which is a calming scent, which is
Yep.
great. Shoot, what else do I smell? Okay, I'll smell myself. Can smell like the detergent.
Yep.
A little bit of the detergent-y smell.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yep. And if you're out and about and you've got a mask on, usually you can smell mask breath, which is not the most soothing smell, but it is a smell and it counts. All right, last one. So we counted all the way down from 5 to 1. What's one thing you can taste?
Can I drink some water to taste water?
No rules.
Taste water, and also my metal straw. So not that it like has a strong, or I'm very used to it, but maybe a little bit of that metally taste.
All right. So now, what do you notice after moving through all 5 senses? Do you notice anything?
I feel very present.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, and just very much like more aware of what's going on around me. So I could see how that could be really beneficial if I'm like too inner focused on me and whatever. But now I see some things, I hear some things. So I think sometimes like our anxiety is worse when we're like having feelings about our feelings. So
it's expanding your awareness, right? Not just having that internal awareness, but expanding it outward a little bit. And the part of your brain that you were using, I'm going to nerd out again. Here we go. The part of your brain that you were using is right here. It's called the medial prefrontal cortex. It's a little tiny spot on your brain that is able to be aware of where you are in space, in the moment, and use all those senses to kind of be present, right? Mindfulness is what this is in charge of. When that part is activated, this lower primal part of our brain calms down, right? And so if we can catch it before this part of our brain is completely in control, this part of our brain helps soothe the rest of our brain. You can also do things specifically. If one of the 5 senses works better for you, use that one, right? If you know a certain scent helps bring you back. Some people really benefit from popping a mint in their mouth when they feel anxiety rising, or a sour candy, right? Some people benefit better from that. You can actually stop a panic attack by popping a really sour candy in your mouth if you are able to do that soon enough. It's amazing because our senses bring us back to the present moment. Another thing that's really important, another everyday strategy, is orienting, which you already did a little bit of this at the beginning of that exercise. It just means scanning the horizon, letting your neck slowly turn, scan from side to side, and notice. Our brains love to scan for threats. And when we are on a computer all day long, we're not letting our brain do that, right? So giving yourself every hour a reminder to look up and just scan the room. Not for any reason in particular, but just let your eyes take in all the information around you, because our brains are wondering if there's a saber-toothed tiger back there, right? We know this part of our brain knows there's not a saber-toothed tiger back there, but this part of our brain doesn't. So giving your brain enough input in a calm, kind of grounded way can be helpful. And then the last one is thinking about our thoughts, right? You'll notice I didn't start with the thoughts, right? We brought this up earlier, right? That thought of like, why am I feeling anxious? Oftentimes when we're in a state of anxiety, that's not very helpful. But once we're outside of that state, taking some time, maybe do some journaling. I'm not a big journaler myself, so I don't usually recommend it to people, but if you're a journaler, do it, right? Or talk to a friend and take some time kind of processing what was the thought that prompted that anxiety, or what is the belief about myself that prompted that anxiety, kind of digging into that a little bit and deciding if that thought is something that's helpful for you, or if that belief is something that's helpful for you, and finding ways to shift it so that it's not quite so harmful or anxiety provoking. Can be one thing that is really helpful in the long term of really finding some relief. And that is sometimes what takes that external support. So we talked about strategies, but it's also important to think about what are those external supports that you need to step into your life. And that might be professional support in some cases. A therapist can really help you dig into those thoughts and those beliefs that might be triggering and kind of underpinning the anxiety. In the meantime, you can find relief with some of these strategies for the body experience of anxiety, but a lot of times there's some core beliefs there that are underpinning a lot of it. And that might be something that's really helpful to explore with a therapist, especially if it feels like it goes way back to kind of like early days, childhood, some of those core beliefs that formed early on. Oftentimes a professional can help you in really incredible ways unpack some of that, but also community. People around you, people you trust who you can talk through, right? Sometimes it just takes calling up a friend and being like, I have this belief about myself, and letting them, hearing them counter that belief based on what they see in you, and be able to give that honest encouragement. But what's underpinning all of this is compassion, right? You need to have people in your world that can show you compassion, and you need to be able to show yourself compassion. The moment that we're saying things like should, the moment that we're having negative feelings about our anxiety, that's when we're going to spiral, right? But instead, meeting it with compassion. And what that looks like is just saying, it makes sense that I'm anxious right now. Of course, I'm anxious when there's a global pandemic. Of course, I'm anxious when I'm taking in all of this information of everything that's happening around the world, right? This makes sense. That's kind of where compassion really starts.
Mm. So yeah, if self-compassion is underpinning all of this, tell us a little more about what is self-compassion? What does it look like? How do we exhibit it?
For sure. And I'm gonna cite a very specific resource. Self-compassion has been around for a long time, right? It was not invented by this person that I'm going to cite. But Kristen Neff is one of the big self-compassion researchers out there. And you can find out more on her website, selfcompassion.org. But she, in all of her research, has kind of broken down self-compassion into 3 buckets. It's kind of 3 components that all work together to allow us to show ourselves compassion. Okay, so the first one is mindfulness, which we've done some practicing of, right? Being in the present moment, being able to notice our feelings without over-identifying with them. So instead of saying, I'm so anxious right now and I will be anxious forever, it's saying, I'm seeing some anxiety come up. I'm noticing some anxiety rising up in me, right? So it's holding on to, I am not that feeling, but I'm experiencing that feeling, which it takes some practice. Right? It takes some practice, and she's got some great exercises on her website, and Brianna will share that website either in the chat if you're live, as well as later on when she puts up the recording. But yeah, so that's the first component, mindfulness. The second component is self-kindness. So when you see that emotion rising up, meet it with kindness. Sometimes that's hard to do because we haven't learned how to be kind to ourselves. Some of us are really good at being kind to others, and we're not very kind to ourselves. We're our own worst critics. So some of us need a little extra help. I'm saying us because I am in this camp. Some of us need a little extra help, and think about, what would you say to a friend that you care deeply about? So if I was struggling with self-compassion, I might think, what would I say to Brianna if Brianna was having this judgmental thought? Like, I shouldn't be feeling anxious, or why can't I get it together, right? What would you say to a friend if they had that thought, or if they were having this experience? What would I say to Brianna if she was having a period of anxiety that she couldn't shake? Would I say, yeah, you really should work on that? You know these breathing exercises. Snap out of it, Brianna. No, of course not. It like makes you sick to even say that out loud jokingly, right? I would never say that to a dear friend of mine. So why do I say it to myself? So instead, meet yourself with that same kindness that you would meet a dear friend with, right? And then the third part is called common humanity. It's this idea that you are not alone in this feeling. So it's not to dip into comparison, because that's also not necessarily helpful. It's not to go into this place of other people have it worse than me, so I should be doing better, right? That's looping back into judgment and self-criticism, which is not self-compassion, right? But it's this idea of, I am not the only human being to experience this anxiety. It makes sense that I, as a human, am experiencing this anxiety, and I'm not alone in it. There's people I can go to support me, right? There's people I can go to who can help me find the hope that I'm not always going to feel like this, right? So mindfulness, self-kindness, common humanity. You can wrap that all up thinking about this statement, right? Kristen Neff, this is her quote. She says, this is a moment of suffering, right? I'm in a moment of suffering. Maybe this is a moment of anxiety. I'm seeing the anxiety and being mindful about that. This is a moment of anxiety. Anxiety is a part of life. She says suffering is a part of life, but I know we're talking about anxiety today. So this is a moment of anxiety. Anxiety is a part of the human existence. May I be kind to myself in this moment and show myself the compassion that I need. And then it usually looks like doing something physically for ourselves to tend to our bodies, right? Maybe it's just as simple as letting yourself lay down for a few minutes. Cactus arms, right? Not doing it because we should, but doing it because it's a kind thing to do to our bodies and for our bodies when they're in a state of anxiety. So that's what underpins all of this, right? I can throw a million strategies at you, and if you're doing them from a place of judgment and self-criticism, they're not very helpful. They don't get us out of this loop that we get stuck in when it comes to anxiety.
Yeah. Just want to emphasize Dr. Kristen Neff's work. I have taken her quiz around my level of self-compassion. So I do recommend that. It helps you to highlight, of those three, which ones are you better at? Which ones do you struggle with a little more? So that's super helpful. And she has some other great resources available. So she's really great. And then also I'll just say this, for me, when this whole process of self-compassion began was when Brené I thought it was just me, but it isn't, said that essentially if you can't show yourself compassion, you're probably not really showing other people compassion. And I heard that. I was like, no. I totally show other people compassion because I was not very compassionate to myself. And then just a few days later, I was totally judging my roommate in my head, not showing her compassion. And I was like, darn it, Brené is right.
She usually is.
She is. Love her and hate her for it. Mostly love her. Just hard truth sometimes. So yes, take the quiz, check out her website. It's super helpful for self-compassion. So I just want to, we're getting close to the end of our time, but would you re-emphasize for us again, how do we know, when should we seek out professional help versus when can, self-compassion, these strategies, our community, when is that enough and when do we need to seek out professional help?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I'll say is that a lot of times we get ourselves into this place where we wait until it's absolutely urgent to go get therapy. And the thing about therapy is it's so dependent. How helpful it is very dependent on the relationship and trust you have with your therapist. And that we all know takes time, right? You're not going to step into a therapy room or a therapy Zoom and immediately trust this person with everything. It's going to take some time to be able to be in a place where you feel like you can be vulnerable with them to really start doing the work. And so the thing I'm going to say is don't wait until it's urgent, right? I've done that. I've done that where I waited and I was like, I don't need therapy yet. If it gets really bad, I'll go, right? So that's the caveat I want to give to this. And also, there is nothing wrong with saying, you know what, I just want to explore this. Like, I don't have any major concerns, but I know that I probably could have a little less anxiety in my life and I want to explore whether that's possible, right? That's great, right? I love it when clients come to me and they're like, I'm ready to do some exploration here. And it's not because I'm in crisis, but I just want to figure this out. I want to do a little exploring. And if you're in crisis, absolutely seek out help, right? If you're in, significant crisis, there are definitely resources out there, hotlines out there. I will make sure that Brianna has some specific ones to share with this video. Definitely seek out help if it's urgent, right? There's no shame in getting help. And then, kind of the middle ground where you're like, I'm functioning, but this is rough. Right. And sometimes we get used to functioning at a much lower level than would be kind of a good quality of life. Right. So then when it's starting to affect your sleep, when it's starting to affect your eating, when it's starting to negatively impact your relationships, right? It's really, really important that you think about how you can take care of yourself first. Right. Often we're at the bottom of our checklist. And I will say it doesn't just necessarily go away on its own, right? The stresses that are causing this anxiety will continue to be a part of life. That's not going to change. I'm one of those people that's like, if I just get my schedule perfect, I won't feel anxious or stressed, right? That's not real, right? It's all like, life is hard and has things that trigger anxiety. And so if you're noticing that it's impacting your functioning, definitely seek out someone who can support you in that. And a great resource, I know it's hard to know where to start, but a great resource is psychologytoday.com. They have a find a therapist option. I think it works in Canada as well. Do you know, Brianna? Yeah, it does. Yeah. So US and Canada, it's a search function, and you can literally type in just about any filter criteria you want, including insurance that they take, including whether they do in-person or virtual, if they have a sliding scale, specific issues that they are trained to help folks in. It's really important that you find someone that's a good fit. And Psychology Today is going to have a bio and information, and it'll let you know too if someone offers what's called like a free consultation phone call, because sometimes that's important, just to kind of get someone on the phone, hear their voice, to feel out if it feels like it's going to be a good fit. And the other thing is, if it doesn't feel like a good fit right away, don't give up. And be honest, right? Sometimes there's things that therapists can shift and do differently to help it be a better fit. So stick with it, be honest with your therapist, give them feedback. And if it's not a good fit in the end, keep trying, right? Sometimes the first one or two therapists aren't a good fit, and that process can be exhausting. Let's be real, but stick with it because it's so worth it. Someone who has benefited significantly myself and a believer in it because I'm a part of the field, it is so, so worth it.
You for that, Emily. So we're going to wrap up. So any last thought that you want to leave us with, any exercise, any words of truth that we can take with us as we go about the day and into this anxiety-inducing world?
One thing that's a little playful that I do with some of my child clients, but I think it can be just as helpful for adults. It can be really helpful with the mindfulness piece. Decide a name for those anxious thoughts, right? Because it is not who you are, right? The self, who we are at our core, is separate from these anxious thoughts and these anxious spirals that we can get into. I have one client that's decided her anxious thoughts are Elmo, and I have an Elmo puppet in my room, and we tell Elmo the what for, right? Sometimes having something that represents your anxiety or these anxious thoughts can be helpful. And then you can visualize kind of responding to it rather than joining with it necessarily. That's just something that might be playful. Maybe it's Elmo, maybe it's something else, maybe it's just a color, right? But giving it some kind of name and being able to say, I see you. Of course you're coming up right now, and I don't have to join you. I don't have to go all the way down into that very dark pit that anxiety can drive us into. And just be gentle, gentle with yourself. To be a human is to have anxiety right now. And that's okay. Be gentle and take care.
Yes, that's self-compassion. Okay, well, thank you, Emily, for joining us today. I have so many takeaways. Love all the strategies. I'm going to come up with a name for my anxiety. I feel like I need it to start with an A. It's gonna start with an A. So I'm gonna try that out and check out those resources. Maybe I should start looking into therapy. Just kidding. I've been saying that for a long time.
But usually the journey to therapy is very long. Sometimes you're saying you're looking for a therapist longer than you're in therapy itself. I've been there.
We'll get there. Yes. So thank you so much, Emily. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, whether live or watching this recording. We really appreciate it. If you do have any questions as a follow-up, you can, or about any of the resources, you can email me, Brianna at venturetoimpact.org, and I'll share with you what Emily has shared with me. But thank you for joining us also for Aspire 2021. And that's it. That's a wrap on Reimagine and Evolve, although that makes it seem like it's over. Put all this into practice as we reimagine and evolve. We'll use these strategies to help us as we move forward into this sometimes scary world, but also one that is full of hope.